The people have kindled lights in the midst of the long night since the first time a stone made a spark. People have gathered to force away the fear that comes with the unknown through the light that shines in the coldest hour. And so, every one of you ghouls and goblins, we shine a light. On this All Hallows Eve, we shine a light. We shine it into every corner of the night, and to all those who would bid us live in fear. May this single hour of the spooky season find us filled here together with both joy and courage, for we are one another's little monsters, going forth into the world with a brightness that meets all our fear and transforms it into gladness. May it be so. Good morning. Let this light shine and come. Let us worship together.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. If we haven't met yet, I'm Reverend Karen Rasmussen, your affiliate minister. Whoever you are, and whomever you love, and however you arrived at this beloved place this morning, you are welcome here. Welcome to our spooky time this morning. Whether you're joining us this morning from online or in person, we are so glad that you are here. I do have my costume on. You might not be able to see it, but there's a Wonder Woman design in my jacket. If you are visiting our worship for the first time and you are new to the River Road community, please send us an email after the service to connections@rruuc.org and tell us your name so that we may greet you. Welcome, everyone, because it is a dark and stormy night.
Good morning, happy Halloween. I'm Beth Irakura, your Director of Religious Education, and also happy Samhain. Today is the time of Samhain in the pagan tradition. It marks one of what they call a cross quarter, so it's exactly equidistant between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. It's often said that this time of year, when the leaves are losing their leaves, and the Pleiades constellation is high in the sky at night, that it's a time when the veil is thin and we are more connected to those we've lost over the years and our ancestors. Each year, about this time for the last several years, my spiritual director has hosted an online celebration at this time of year she calls A Toast to the Ancestors. So we're going to try that a little bit today. You can be thinking of an ancestor who is really important to you, whether it's by blood relation or someone you admire who's left this world and still has a lot of meaning for you in your life. I'll model it, and then we'll do it together. After anyone's given a toast at this celebration, we will say, "Hail and thanks." Hail to bring in the spirit of our lost loved one, and thanks to thank them for everything they've done for us. So I will start. In our tradition, we also have special glasses, special beverages. Today I have a special glass. This was my grandmother's, my grandma Arlene. It was very special to her, one of her prized possessions. And as I'm toasting her, I will fill it with virtual orange juice to represent the orange trees at her house. So to my grandma Arlene, thank you for always being there for me, for always seeing the best in me, and for showing me what a grandmother can be. And we all say, hail and thanks. Could also be a relative that you never met. So for instance, my great-grandfather Basil, I've never met him, but the stories in the family linger today. So to my great-grandfather Basil, I thank you for all the stories of your extreme generosity, generosity of spirit, generosity of heart, generosity of material things and not material things. Thank you. Hail and thanks. So I invite you now to turn to someone near you and offer a toast to one of your ancestors. If you're online and watching this through the YouTube, I invite you to turn to someone in your house or speak to the room or type in the chat your toast to your ancestors. Go ahead. Hail and thanks. Isn't that cool?
I just want to put bubble wrap around it.
I know, I'm really nervous.
Yeah.
There's a whole set. And they were in her attic the entire time I knew her. She kept saying, rose crystal and stuff is all yours.
It is absolutely.
She never used it. Yeah, I love it. I have one on my altar at home too. So.
Look, they're doing the thing.
They are doing it.
It's a good thing.
No, I should take it back. So to all of our ancestors, related and not blood related, known, thanked in our hearts and in our words, hail and thanks.
We are a community of caring. We join in your joy and in your good times. We hold you in love through your tough times and through your sorrows. We so value our connections and know that we are here for you. On this Halloween day, we lift up our ancestors, those who moved with faith and fear across the landscape of our own lives. We mourn and remember the ones we have lost not only recently, but over the span of our time on this earth. Particularly this week, we honor the life of Jean Loring and Richard Moore and Ken Van Mechelen and Bobby Sachs, all of whom are honored and remembered in this community. We hold the memory of Aman Arbery, knowing that the jury selection in this trial for his killing is underway. We lift up our hearts and hands to those suffering under the flooding experienced here in the DC region and across the nation during this week of heavy, heavy rain. We make a space for the joys and sorrows in the corners of our own lives, for the hip replacement for Reverend Karn on Monday morning, and Patrina Hollingsworth entering a new stage of cancer treatment this week. May we hold it all, the loss and the love, with grace on this All Hallows Eve.
Gathered here on the historic lands of the Coachtonk and Piscataway people. Gathered here on land which enriched the machine of enslavement and power over instead of power with. Gathered here in this place where we carry not only our joys and our sorrows, but the scars and the gifts of those who came before. I invite you to join me as you are willing and able for words of meditation, of centering, and of prayer. Spirit of life and source of love, you who move within all things, even grief, and even loss, and even death. We gather in this place always surrounded as the sages say, by so great a cloud of witnesses, hovering not only above us, but dwelling within us, those witnesses of our ancestors and the shapers of a nation, the shapers of our culture and our very ways of being, the ones who made us who we are, for good and for ill, and for the complexities that weave them all together. As we celebrate the shrieks of joyful fear that emerge on the very edge of laughter, we are grateful that our fear might sometimes be a source of celebration. We are grateful for the moments when that fear can be transformed into continued life, and we hold also that fear which cannot be transformed, which cannot be absolved, which cannot be eliminated. The fear for the world as it is, yearning always for the world as it should be. Spirit of life and source of love, be with us along with the ancestors on this All Hallows Eve. Grant us joy amidst our trembling, and grant us community amidst all the long dark nights and the ways that we must walk them alone. Amen, and blessed be.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
There are times in this life where, for all sorts of reasons, holy and otherwise, we are depleted enough that we must merely take the gifts of our companions on the journey. There are times in life also where we are honored to be capable of being the givers. Givers of life, givers of blessing, givers of hope. Yes, givers of time, talent, and treasure for what we hold most dear, including the communities and the families that we call our own. In this time of offering, as we are blessed with song about what it takes to hold each other in the very scariest things of all, I invite you to give as you are willing and able. You can text to give 73256. I've actually memorized the number after almost 2 years. You can give on our website. You can reach out to your neighbors in any number of ways. What a blessing it is to both take and to give in beloved community, each in turn, as we are willing and as we are able.
Not to worry, I may not be smart, but I ain't dumb. Let me do it, put me to it, show me something I can overcome. Not to worry, John. Nothing's gonna harm you, not while I'm around. Nothing's gonna harm you, no sir, not while I'm around. Demons are prowling everywhere nowadays. I'll send them howling, I don't care, I've got ways. No one's gonna hurt you, no one's gonna dare. Others can desert you, not to worry, we'll still all be there. Demons will charm you with a smile for a while, but in time, nothing can harm you, not while I'm around. Nothing's gonna harm you, not while I'm around. Nothing's gonna harm you, no sir, not while I'm around. Demons are prowling everywhere nowadays. I'll send them howling, I don't care, I've got ways. No one's gonna hurt you, no one's gonna dare. Others can desert you, not to worry, we'll still all be there. Demons will charm you with a smile for a while, but in time, nothing can harm you, not while I'm around.
Thank you, Jan. It was a dark and stormy night. In the springtime of a year with no summer. A volcano had erupted, you see. Far away on an island in the Indies, a volcano had erupted, and so the sun literally did not shine over the whole of Europe in the entire spring and summer of 1813. For months on end, in fact in 1816, for months on end, all light was obscured behind great clouds of ash and dust. The darkness cloaked one old but venerable villa on the shores of Lake Geneva in literally endless night, while a small collection of friends, and let's face it, not quite friends, gathered there to wait out the darkness and the winds of change that blew them about on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution. They were the best and the brightest of their age. These friends holed up together in a year without summer. And on one night, perhaps no darker nor stormier than the others, the friends decided that they would pass the ample time that stretched out before them by telling each other scary stories. And so they did. These beautiful, young, haunted people. They told each other scary stories born out of real life darkness. And from that single fearful night of imagining were born two of the most iconic monsters of their or any generation. You know one of the monsters, I think. Both the author and her creature. Because it turns out that the famed poet Percy Bysshe Shelley had brought along his girlfriend on that trip to that haunted villa on the shores of Lake Geneva. In a cold Edwardian springtime, her name was Mary Wollstonecraft Goodwin, who would become Mary Shelley, who would that very night, among her friends, in the darkness of a summer that never came, plant a seed that became her boundary-breaking novel of science, fanaticism, hate, and hunger. The book, of course, is Frankenstein. This was her creation on that dark and stormy night, which she sent out uneasily into the world to thread its way through the nightmares of generations. As she wrote in the foreword to that famous text, "I bid my hideous progeny go forth and prosper." Frankenstein was born that night. But do you know the other monster who was birthed in that storm-tossed villa? For that I have more haunted poets to introduce you to. One of them who died as a forgotten shadow of his once great potential, miserable in the depths of his own disappointment. The other poet whose name would be sung from the lips of 1,000,000 grieving women and not a few besotted men before his days were done. Let me introduce you to the first. One John Polidori, a polymath Englishman of Italian descent whose family wanted him to be a doctor while his whole heart yearned to dance with the rhythms of the written word. Polidori was a capable enough physician and a deeply unremarkable playwright. It is said that he shoved his scripts in the face of every man of means in late Edwardian England, hoping for the big break that would make him something more than the world seemed to want him to be. Until one day he showed his script to the world-famous playboy of the swaggering set, the pale and haunted figure of a man whom he had envied, followed, and emulated for years. None other than Alfred, Lord Byron, who was already the most famous and infamous poet of the age. "Read my work," Polidori begged Byron, pressing a text into his hand. And so the great poet obliged. He took one look at the belabored prose that Polidori handed him, and in front of all those fancy people gathered for a fancy event, he laughed out loud. He mocked him. He ridiculed him. And yet he saw within Polidori a certain needy desire that was also in some ways quite appealing. And so even while belittling this man, Byron brought him in closer and closer and closer to his inner circle until Polidori would later write that in the company of Byron he was like a star in the halo of the moon, invisible. Invisible though he was, Polidori served a purpose. In time, Lord Byron made him his own personal physician, and these are the events that caused the two of them, John Polidori and Alfred Lord Byron, to be present at that gathering of poets on Lake Geneva on that fateful night, swapping all their stories into the darkness. Byron was in many ways the great haunted rock star of Edwardian times. He had an uncanny ability not just to tap into the tenor of his times, but to shape it all around him. The man was preternaturally pale and eternally elegant. He carried himself in a way that seemed ageless, moving through each and every room he entered, like that luminous moon shining briefly on the face of every admirer and moving on quickly, leaving every person he encountered feeling somehow drained by the sheer life force of a man whose frail body and charismatic power somehow served to fully eclipse their own identities in the world. As the scholar Andrew McConnell Stott has written, one of Byron's many admirers described him as having such a voice as the devil tempted Eve with. You feared its fascination from the moment you heard it, and it was that voice, that power, that uncanny allure that drew John Polidori always back into Byron's shadow, even as the great man took every opportunity at his disposal to belittle and to demean and to knock down the worth and value of his own personal physician. The two moved around Europe together in this dance between envy and subjugation. And while they spent their time writing beautiful words among beautiful people, it was clear that Byron could only achieve his particular form of greatness by taking something from the people around him. When someone was no longer interesting to him, no longer inspirational to his process, he moved on. In Andrew Stott's word, Byron was a devourer of souls, leaving lovers and family members, even a child, behind him always in his ever-moving wake of creation and destruction. And so by this point, perhaps you should not be surprised that when the poets sat to tell their stories of monsters that night, John Polidori, the pale star in the halo of Byron's all-consuming moon, he told a tale of what was to become the very first modern vampire. Suave and debonair, seducing while destroying, he made a monster out of his own deep suffering. Vampires, you see, they had been creatures out of nightmare for a very, very long time before that night. But until Polidori's imagination met Polidori's pain in that fateful springtime, vampires were pretty much always dirty, scrabbling creatures, zombie-like and withered, carrying not so much fascination as revulsion. They represented fathomless forces that turned corpses into danger or infection or disease. They were an embodiment of plague. It was Polidori who first told the tale of a bloodsucker in a fine frock coat, whose pale face blended with the beautiful people and drained your energy more than any imagined bloodsucker ever could. It was Polidori who clothed the vampire in desirability and mesmerism and panache, which have become the hallmarks of vampire fiction ever since, most notably in that ever-debonair Master of the Night that Bram Stoker would write about years later while crediting a certain obscure Edwardian novel, The Vampire, as his influence. Yes, Frankenstein was born that night on Lake Geneva, but so was Dracula. And if Frankenstein was a new Prometheus, an elaborate allegory for the dangers of the endless human quest for power and progress through industry, well, Dracula, it's an allegory for one man's deeply painful, unmet desire to matter in this world. It's an allegory for the horrible emotional impact of a toxic relationship, for the steady drip, drip, drip of life drained away by an emotional vampire who thrived on the suffering of others, all while creating something beautiful along the way. And those two monsters, Frankenstein's horrible creation and the pale, handsome vampire, they were an external revealing of the collective and personal fears of their creators, which is, after all, the only thing monsters have ever been. In fact, the word monster itself stems from the Latin monstrare, which literally translates to show or to reveal. It is a revealing of something that actually exists. It is a heightened way of showing the fears we actually carry. It is an externalization of what has been inside of us all along. As the scholar Jeffrey Jerome Cohen has put it, you can read a culture by the monsters it creates. And every time we examine the monsters that we have created for one another, we cannot view them separate from what Cohen calls the intricate networks of relationships that generate them. Monsters are born within us and among us. They are a way of putting narrative form and shape to fears we cannot wholly manage on our own. More often than not, they represent anything and everything inside of ourselves and our culture that we are either too afraid or too vulnerable to deal with directly. And so we spin out tales of creatures and forces that terrify and fascinate, beings who repel and attract because strangely they are all aspects of ourselves. As Cohen has written, fear of the monster is also a kind of desirability. We distrust and loathe the monster while we envy its freedom. And so the body of a monster is a text representing human fear and hope. It is an externalizing of realities within ourselves that we don't feel brave enough to deal with. It is a projection onto an imagined other of what is repressed and undealt with within ourselves. And so we monsterize our anxieties. And we send them out into the world, as Mary Shelley said, as hideous progeny to go forth and prosper. And if I am being honest, sometimes I am glad we do. Culture gives birth to monsters not because of some weakness in the human condition, but because our creative souls are always reaching and reaching for metaphor and story to wrap around all of the hurt we feel. Because sometimes we do need a monster for all that we cannot handle ourselves. Sometimes we need Halloween to come once a year, not just to honor the ancestors, but to give us an excuse to download our fear and anxiety onto forces beyond our control. You may be surprised. For real, I love a good horror movie. My children do not need to see my Netflix account. I love a good horror movie, especially if it involves a good monster and not just another boring, run-of-the-mill evil human. And I also know that the creation of a monster outside of us to hold the hurt and the yearning that dwells deep inside of us, it's never enough. I know, for instance, that the relationships which take more than they give are real, and I know that those relationships can kill. I know that emotional vampires who thrive on other people's suffering stalk our shores even now, and that many of us suffer under a yearning to be more, to matter more, to create more, to love and be loved more, a yearning which is continually unmet when confronted with those persons and structures that would drain us of life instead of fill us with hope. I know those monsters are real. I know, for instance, that John Polidori published his work from that night as a small novel, which he indeed called The Vampire, and that it garnered no particular critical acclaim until it was republished against his will with a mistaken attribution. It came out, you see, with a title page reading, The Vampire, a tale by Lord Byron. And no less a luminary than Goethe declared that it was the greatest thing Byron had ever written. It made money, lots of money, for Byron and his estate, while the actual author spent years attempting to claim his right as a creator, all while being accused of plagiarism and the indignity of riding on Byron's endless coattails. Yes, even his beautiful monster was usurped by the beautiful monster who inspired it. And Polidori couldn't survive it. We create things of great darkness when we allow cycles of suffering to go unabated in our relationships and in our hearts. We create monsters when both society and our own deep fears leave us unable or unwilling to both name our desires and our deepest suffering. And while the externalizing of our hurt can be a form of art, the fact remains that we must deal with that hurt and that brokenness of our relationships and our society directly and headlong before those creatures we create have the chance to consume us whole. No monster, no matter how fascinating, deserves the sacrifice of a single human soul. No story should get told while the suffering that lies behind its creation goes unabated. This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine, speaks the character Caliban in Shakespeare's The Tempest. This storm-tossed creation of my fear and yearning, I made it and I let it loose, and this spooky season, when all the ghouls and goblins all the creatures we love to fear and laugh to see. When the ghouls and goblins make their way past us this season, may we acknowledge first the monsters roiling within us, name them and claim them, so that perhaps we might exorcise them before it is too late. Let all the beasts and the characters and the monsters and the mayhem march before us on Halloween with joy as much as fear, knowing that we are not alone, that what is within us can indeed be met with love, no matter how much it scares us, and that what emerges from our relationships, from our culture, from our lives, can be not only gorgeously, creatively monstrous, but life-giving and affirming too. And now, in just a few moments, we will let the wild rumpus begin. For all of you at home, you need to know that our children's Halloween parade, coming in from the very scary haunted woods that has peppered this service with screams, will be parading through this sanctuary. We won't be showing the children on camera for reasons of security and safety for everyone in our community, but I invite you to just imagine right where you are, holding our beloved little beings, marching each in turn. Bless and hold them in your heart as they stalk the wild, wild world tonight, and give them life so that they might in turn give life and love right back out to the world on a dark and stormy night like this one. The monsters are coming. That was extraordinarily spooky and fabulous and adorable. And these ghosts, I know, on my headband are very scary as well. This is the part where I'm supposed to give announcements, but I feel like how can you even hear the announcements after a dinosaur just marched through your sanctuary? Just know that there's stuff, like there's an auction coming up, you can donate things. You could do that. And you can help us have more fun even than the fun we had today. We've got a new member class coming up starting the 7th. You can register online right now. Everything we do together is an expression of how we want to be together. And how we want to be together are the kind of people who give each other life instead of take it away. And you know that we are grateful. We're grateful for every single parent and teacher and guide in our religious education program. I don't know who that masked man in the balcony was, but we are grateful for him and for Jan and Schwei and our entire tech team, Scott, Danny, the Leonards, everybody's working up there, and Natalie at home on the Zoom room. For the people who choose community, we are grateful every single time. And so, if you are able and willing, I know we can't hold hands unless you're sitting next to someone in your family, you be you. Extend your hands in blessing. And now, may the truth that makes us free, the love that casts out fear, and the hope that never dies, guide us and those we love and those we do not love forward together till the day spring breaks and the shadows flee away. Amen. Happy Halloween!